Hello, welcome to Confidently Unsure. Today we're going to be looking at my 1996 Toyota 4Runner that I got a little less than a year ago from someone on Facebook Marketplace, a nice old married couple that were looking to sell their grandson or granddaughter's 4Runner. I paid $2,000 for it. They were scared for me to even drive the vehicle back home. However, it's been fairly reliable for me. There are definitely some quirks and a lot of work that I've done and a lot of work that still needs to be done. But today we're going to take a look at it. So this is the 4Runner. I will give you a quick tour around. The previous owner did make some modifications. They have this mesh grille. They changed out the headlights. They didn't do a very good job, to be honest. I'm going to have to redo these at some point. I might get some BX built or some cool headlights installed, but when I got the vehicle, these headlights here were like coming off almost, and it was kind of dangerous, and they're wobbling and stuff, so I kind of just hastily put some glue on to just make it livable. So yeah, it's a little dirty right now as well. We took it out in the snow the other day, and so it definitely needs to be cleaned off. It's been sitting outside for the most part since I've owned it. So it's interesting. For $2,000, I feel like this vehicle is pretty decent. But it definitely has a lot of maintenance items that just were totally either disregarded or just didn't get done. You know, like I said, I've been driving it. I've put about 500 miles on it. The biggest issue I've noticed is the transmission, which basically, like right now outside, it's in the 20s and 30s. And that has caused an issue with it needing to warm up for the transmission to properly engage and to drive. If you just start it up, put it in drive, and just go for it, it will not go for you. So, you know, that's never a good time. I am getting a check engine light for shift solenoid E, and that only turns on when I hop on the highway and I'm going about 65, 60. And if it's not already tripped, it'll trip, and it doesn't do it every time. It just does it every once in a while. If I'm hopping on the highway and it tries to engage the overdrive, it'll trip that. It drives fine. That's the crazy part about it. The engine hums. When you're actually driving the vehicle, it feels great, feels fine. The brakes work well. But it's just one of those things. Now, the other deal is, if you know anything about these 4Runners, and even the Tacomas from this era, they definitely have a rust issue that can be prevalent, especially depending on where the vehicle's lived, and how well it's been taken care of, obviously. From what I can tell, the frame isn't like rotted or rusted through, but it definitely has a lot of surface rust. There is some corrosion, and on the common spots, it has some rust. So just to give you an idea, this is obviously the rear fender area. Quite a bit of rust there going on. And then of course, if we go, areas like this, it's kind of hard to see, but you can, there you go. You can kind of see that this is just kind of rotted through on the bottom here. Pretty bad. Coming along here, it just kind of keeps going. Now the frame, you can see, this is obviously a big piece of the frame, and I mean, that's solid. So a lot of the frame is relatively intact, if you ask me. But there are certain pieces that, do need some tender love and care, to say the least. You can see there's quite a bit of rust built up here, there as well, towards the front. Just a lot of different rusts going on under here. I'm sure it spent a lot of time in Kansas, and from what I'm told, it also spent a lot of time in Colorado for trips. You can see here, this is pretty bad. That's starting to rot through. So it's a little rough. It's a little rough, but for $2,000, especially with the way the market is, with people buying cars left and right and all that, it's pretty okay for me. Now, as you can see here, this liquid drip here, this fluid, that was a big problem we ran into, and I'll show you more underneath the hood, but luckily we've resolved it. Okay, so this is under the hood here. It's a 3.4 liter V6. If you're not familiar with this vehicle, shares a lot in common with the Tacoma of this era. Again, this is a 1996, but the third generation, starts at 1996 and runs to 2002. And there's changes, of course, along the way, but this is the earliest example. So one of the things that I already did, I'll show a picture, but essentially this was nothing but bungee corded down. The battery hold down was not actually there, so I had to order one from a dealership, get that put in, or I put it in, I should say. So that was a must, just because, you know, don't want the battery flying off in here. You know, we did do the mass airflow sensor. I kind of ghetto taped this down because it was a little bit of an air gap there when I put it back on. But I cleaned the mass airflow sensor with some MAF cleaner, and that required putting on a hose clamp. And good Lord, that hose clamp struggled with me. That took me a while. And of course, the biggest thing we ran into for this vehicle when I first got it, a couple months, I realized the coolant was really getting low quite frequently, and it was bewildering. You know, and then I noticed finally where the leak was coming from a little bit. And long story short, we figured out it's actually back here. You can kind of see it. That's the rear heater. And so essentially that hose, where it connects down towards the engine itself, or what have you, the cooling system under there, it was definitely loose. There was just antifreeze grossness getting built up and corroded, and obviously the hose, you know, is original and old and cracked. So after some trial and error, finally got the right hose and hose clamps and everything. Got that new piece there. So it's essentially 2 hose pieces. And there's more work to be done back there if I really want to clean it up. All the hoses are probably brittle and need replaced at some point in time, of course. But you know, that was definitely a project to get fixed. I'm not a very tall guy, so getting back to the very back of the engine proved to be difficult. I eventually had a buddy help me get that installed, just because physically reaching it was quite difficult, given that it's literally in the back of the engine. Essentially, the heater core is back there, kind of not in the cabin, but I suppose it's somewhere in between based on what I know. But regardless, it is definitely still retaining gross fluid, antifreeze. And I think what's going on is that leak was allowing air to get into the system, probably other things to get into the system. And so it would leak, suck up air from either the reservoir after it got low enough or from the actual where the leak spot was, leading to just gross stuff in the actual system. And we flushed this once. We flushed it several times once, and then I didn't realize the leak was there, so we had to go through the whole thing again after we fixed the where the spot of the leak is with the hoses. So long story short, we got that going. We realized while we were flushing the system that when you turn on the heat, especially if you have it on full blast, you have the rear heater and the front heater on. The rear heater was an option for this vehicle, and this one has it. When you did that, essentially it would corrode and gross up the fluid that was in there, and just make it disgusting. So, you know, it would lower its ability to actually effectively flow through the system and all that crap. So, and it just looks gross, smells gross even, and when it's coming out of the truck, when we would flush it, it just smelled terrible, and obviously it's like super not okay to just dispose of that normally. You have to take it somewhere to dispose of it, so it's quite a pain to do this. And but the long story short is the heater core needs to be back flushed. And there's plenty of guides on the internet on how to do it, on YouTube specifically. ChrisFix has some great content about it, and I'm going to use his videos as a basis for this, and kind of reference some other materials. Keeping in mind, I am an extremely novice guy. This is my first kind of project vehicle. It's actually my first vehicle I've done much on. I had previously helped change the oil on my Camry, and my Maxima prior to that, my first car. but I hadn't done it all on my own, you know, and essentially I'm very not mechanically inclined. I'm not a DIYer, but I am trying. We're learning as we go, but basically just trying to get familiar with this truck, get familiar with getting my hands dirty with vehicles. And so in this regard, we're going to try to back flush it. I bought the stuff I need to do this back flush, so hopefully it'll go well and we have everything we need. All right, so up first we have this radiator flush and fill kit. Got it from Advance Auto for like $5, really affordable. And you know, it's one of those things you're probably only going to use it once, but for $5, you know, it's kind of worth it. Makes this process pretty easy from what I understand based on ChrisFix's content. So went ahead and picked that up. This was a little trickier, but I ended up figuring it out with some help from someone at my Menards location here. Basically, based on what ChrisFix, you know, kind of recommended, got this adapter for my hose, my garden hose essentially, and we're gonna hook that up there, and that'll allow it to adapt to this system, for what I understand. And then we need, of course, our hoses that'll allow us to, you know, flush in the back flush in the water one direction, and then obviously the other hose will eject the grossness into a bucket. Okay, so here's what we got so far. Hose connected just like that, and we got it running all the way over here, and then we're gonna connect it over here. Obviously got the bucket ready to go for the gross stuff. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so after much trial and error, we finally have this thing kind of going. So got them hooked up, got the hose clamps and the hoses disconnected, and the flush ready to start. So and here's everything returned to how it should be. Added that new hose clamp because the other one sucked. And then it was a pain to get off. But this is what the fluid looked like coming out of there. We had rinsed out the bucket before putting anything in here, so it should have been fairly clean. And you can see there's definitely some grossness in there. So it probably needed to be done. We'll start her up and see how things go.